TCU needs more production from the tight end position this season for them to be successful in 2025.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That's right, Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. I'm your host, Steven Simcox. I've been covering TCU athletics for the past 12 seasons. Thanks for making Locked On Horned Frogs your first listen. We're brought to you today by TurboTax. It is tax season. Get those taxes done. Use TurboTax. I make it easy for you. Use TurboTax today. We're going to talk about the tight end position today. Is it a breakout season for DJ Rogers? Does Kamorian Pimpton, the transfer from LSU, make some waves? We'll get into that. We'll also break down what's the latest projection for TCU women's basketball. What region are they slated to be in? Which one seed could they be facing off against if they can make it to the Elite Eight? There'd be a number of games they'd have to win before that. But hey, we're fans, we're media, we can project, right? And we'll also get some of your thoughts. But we start today with the TCU offense, and specifically the tight end position. I've said this before. It's easy sometimes to get caught up in people that are coming in from the transfer portal and to get real excited about new players and new potential, and to sometimes lose sight of guys that are currently on the roster that could just make a leap next season based on the fact that they've been in the system for a little bit longer. They've had some time to grow and develop it physically, mentally, all those things. I talked about that with Jordan Bailey because there's a number of exciting wide receivers. Jordan Dwyer being the biggest name that's coming over from Idaho in the transfer portal. Joseph Manjack. There's some new freshmen that are going to be on the roster as well. Ed Small, Terry Shelton. But Jordan Bailey is a guy that towards the end of the season made some plays, made some things happen. And so it would make sense for him to be involved in this offense next year, especially given the fact that he adds some explosiveness to the team and to the roster that they didn't have last year at that spot. As good as JP Richardson was, he wasn't necessarily someone that was going to catch a 5-yard out and turn it upfield and take it to the house. Jordan Bailey's also a good option on special teams. So at the tight end position, I spent a lot of time this offseason talking about Kamorian Pimpton because he's a super intriguing player. He didn't play a lot at LSU, but he made some plays against Oklahoma last year. He was a very highly rated prospect at North Crowley. So he's a local kid. When he was at North Crowley, they didn't just use him as an inline tight end. They had him spread out wide. They had him in the slot. At times, he was an outside wide receiver. He was a matchup nightmare. He's a big guy. He's someone that you can use in the red zone, hopefully. There's a lot of reasons and ways. There's a lot of ways to use Kamorian and reasons for TCU fans to be excited about what he could bring to that position. But it is important that we remember there is a guy on the roster right now in DJ Rogers that slowly, over the last few years, has become more of a factor in this offense. Now, the stats are not eye-popping. Last year, he had 12 receptions for 142 yards and 2 touchdowns. But Drake Dabney, who was the big transfer portal addition from Baylor at the tight end position last year, he had 19 receptions for 193 yards and no touchdowns. So not a huge difference there in their stat lines. And DJ Rogers, when he would catch the football, showed an ability to get upfield and make plays. He had a touchdown reception in the Texas Tech game a couple of years ago, had a couple touchdown receptions this year, had a big catch in the Baylor game that comes to mind this season. Had a few catches against Arizona, 2 catches for 11 yards in the bowl game against Louisiana, so it wasn't a huge factor there. But Drake has shown some flashes of good things. And he'll be in year 3 on campus, and really year 3 of being a contributor, because even as a freshman, he was somebody that stepped in and made some plays. TCU lost Jared Wiley a couple of years ago to the draft, and they did not do a good job of replacing his production. Now, I think it's important to note the Drake Dabney pickup, I don't think was a good one at the end of the day. It didn't work out how they wanted to. Part of that was from a receiving standpoint. But to be honest, the bigger issue with Dabney, in my mind, was he just lacked a physicality that you need at that position. Jared Wiley was really good at going over the middle and catching passes. And he had some big plays. At the end of the season last year against Baylor, had like an 80-plus yard touchdown reception. It was a blown coverage, but he would catch the ball and he could get upfield and make things happen. He was a great security blanket for Max Duggan and Josh Hoover. But another thing that he did well, when they put him on the line of scrimmage, he would get out there and block people. He would drive people off the ball in the run game. He was not afraid to mix it up in pass protection. He brought the entire package to the tight end spot. Last season, it felt like you had two wide receivers out there, especially once Chase Curtis went down with an injury. And Chase Curtis is another name to know here. But when he went out with an injury, it was basically like you had two wide receivers at that spot. And the problem was with last year's team, you had plenty of receiving options. Part of the reason why the tight end position was not used very prominently was because Jack Besh and Savion Williams and JP Richardson were so good at what they did that you didn't really need to get those guys involved. And unfortunately, when you did try to get Drake Dabney involved, it didn't work out super well. And I know part of that is like any position on the football field, you need reps and you need opportunities to get into a rhythm. It's tough to bring somebody cold off the bench and just say, hey, let's get you involved in the offense and have you catch, 5 to 10 passes in a ball game. So it was difficult for Drake to find a rhythm because he wasn't targeted that much. But it's sort of a chicken and the egg thing because he wasn't targeted that much because he wasn't super productive when he got opportunities. When the dust settled, though, TCU's offense in the passing game was plenty prolific enough last year. It wasn't like they were missing production in passing yardage or in touchdowns. They didn't really need the tight end to be a huge factor in the passing game. However, you look at this season, I like this receiving core. I mentioned the names earlier. Eric McAllister is going to be a dog. He's going to be great. He had an outstanding season last year as basically the fourth or fifth option in the passing game. Jordan Dwyer, I think he's potentially going to be really good. Joseph Manjack, I feel like you know exactly what you're going to get from him. And that's a valuable thing to have. But it's not crazy to expect there to be a drop-off at wide receiver because the group you had there last year was so elite. Savion Williams is going to get drafted. Jack Besh is going to get drafted. JP Richardson is probably going to be an undrafted free agent that signs with somebody and gets an opportunity in camp to show something. Losing all three of those guys is a big deal. So you'll need to lean a little bit more on your running backs and your tight ends to supplement some of the things you're doing in the passing game. Well, that gives opportunities to DJ Rogers. That gives opportunities to Kamorian Pimpton. Here's the real key, though. Who's going to step up and be a physical presence at tight end? I think Chase Curtis can do some of it. But he can't be the only guy that when he steps in there and gets on the line of scrimmage is ready to maul and brawl with somebody. Because when I was talking with the Locked On LSU host about Kamorian and his career at LSU and why did he sort of fall out of favor with Brian Kelly, he was pretty blunt about it. He said, look, Kamorian is a talented dude. They liked the potential of what he could bring in the passing game. But Brian Kelly's vision for the tight end position, the first thing he thinks about, his priority number one for his tight ends, is he needs people that are going to be effective blocking in the run game and in the pass game. And if you don't buy into that, and if you can't do that at a high level, then you're not going to see the field. Now, with DJ Rogers most likely being your starter, with Curtis being another kind of change of pace guy, I think there's a possibility that they allow Kamorian to do what he does best, which is be effective in the pass game. Maybe they line him up in the slot some. But you can only really have one of those guys. Meaning, if you got one guy at the tight end spot that everybody sort of knows, this is a receiving threat. When he's in the ball game, we're trying to get him the ball in the passing game. That's fine. But that means your other 2 or 3 guys that are on the field sharing reps at that position, they have to bring the physicality to the table that you need. And Chase Curtis can't be the only player that's going to buy into that. You're going to need DJ Rogers to do it as well. And if he improves in that aspect of it and gets more involved in the passing game, then I think we're talking about a dude that could play in the NFL one day. He has that type of athleticism. He's 6'4", 250 pounds. He's got good size. He needs to take the next step, though, in becoming a more complete tight end. And part of that will be getting more opportunities as well. He needs to take a step forward in that area. And if those 2 guys do that well, then yeah, maybe you can just allow Kamorian Pimpton to thrive in passing situations. But you need somebody to bring more physicality at the tight end spot. Because that's going to help your offensive line too. It's going to help your run game. It all comes together if everyone buys into the physicality aspect of it. When we come back, TCU women in South Carolina's region. We'll talk about that next on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. You ever open up your banking app and you're like, what the heck just happened? Where did my money go? I thought I had this much. Instead I have this much. I got some bills coming out. Auto pay got me. Those recurring subscriptions, whatever it is, it's difficult, man. Things are more expensive than ever. It's difficult to stay within your budget. Give Monarch Money a try. Monarch Money is not just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, your investments, and spending in one place. So stop just managing your money and start building wealth. They have surprising insights to let you know how much you're spending on different things. So if you're someone that's spending way too much on DoorDash or Uber Eats or something like that, Monarch Money will help you budget for those things. I'm talking to myself. I'm not talking to you. They have all-in-one convenience. You can monitor all your accounts from one easy app, and they make managing your money smoother than ever. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Monarch Money. Check it out today. Make them a part of your financial planning routine. I also want to talk to you about Factor Meals. As someone who's very busy, as I know most of you are, running around with 4 kids, working a couple different jobs, one of the most important things is nutrition, making sure I have proper energy and I'm putting the right things in my body. But it's also one of the most difficult things to find time for. Meal planning, meal prep, all that stuff can be really stressful. Give Factor a try. If you're looking to optimize your nutrition this year, they have 40 options across 8 dietary preferences, whether it's Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto. Factor even offers wholesome smoothies, breakfast, and grab-and-go snacks to keep you fueled all day. They take the stress out of meal planning. They have Protein Plus meals that are packed with flavor and keep you full throughout the day. The convenience is unbeatable. No prep, no mess, just great food in minutes. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/lockedoncollege for 50% off your first order. That's 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code LOCKEDONCollege 50 off at factormeals.com/lockedoncollege 50 off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first. So I was looking yesterday. Charlie Cream is the women's bracketology expert for ESPN. And I was curious, like, what is TCU's draw looking like? Now, these projections, they're just projections, right? Charlie's been doing this a long time. I imagine he has some insight into what the committee's thinking, what they want to do. But I wouldn't necessarily get too caught up in the matchups. I think the seeding is the thing that he's most likely to get right. And so the good news is TCU has jumped up to a 2 seed. They were for a long time sitting in a 3 seed, which made really no sense given the fact that they beat NC State earlier this year, which was one of the teams that was ahead of them as a 2 seed. They also beat Notre Dame, who is projected to be a 1 seed. They played South Carolina and lost on a neutral floor. Their only other 2 losses were to Oklahoma State and Kansas State on the road. But he has them as a 2 seed, and he's got them in South Carolina's region, which the Sweet 16 Elite 8 for that region is in Birmingham. Don't forget, the top 16 seeds in similar fashion to baseball, so the top 4 seeds in each region, get to host the first and second round matchups. So TCU will host their first and second round games. Then they would go to Birmingham in this projection for Sweet 16 and potentially the Elite 8. He has South Carolina as the 1 seed in their region, which he's got South Carolina as the top overall seed, meaning he's got TCU as the last team on the 2 line. And that would obviously not be ideal because they played South Carolina a few months ago, got beat pretty soundly. However, that was a few months ago. I mean, on the flip side of that, you beat Notre Dame earlier this year. That was also a long time ago. Notre Dame has an idea of what you're doing, right? UCLA has been the number 1 team in the country for the majority of the year. And then Texas is most likely going to be the other 1 seed. I thought that's where they might end up because in the past, the women's basketball bracket matrix folks have put a big emphasis on regionality. Everyone does to a certain extent, but they like those in-state, sometimes even in-conference matchups in the second weekend of the tournament. And it does drum up interest, but in this case, it'd be a team that TCU hadn't played this year. It would just be a Texas team that they've been familiar with in the past. The 15 seed that he has projected to play TCU is Southeast Louisiana. And then the 7-10 matchup is Vanderbilt and Indiana. So Vandy has a true freshman guard, Michaela Blakes, who is an incredible player. She's averaging 23 points a game this year. She's shooting 45% from the field. She had a 53-point game performance earlier this season. They played South Carolina in the SEC tournament in their last game of the regular season / postseason, and she scored 20 points. She can go. So that would be a very dangerous 7 seed. Now you're playing at home. TCU obviously is a deep team, but Vandy's only lost 10 games. They're really good. The reality of it, you're going to play good teams in this tournament at some point. I think that would be kind of a tough draw, though, in a second round matchup against a team and a player that can really match TCU's firepower. One thing that I'll say about this group and their run in the tournament, Haley Van Lith has been outstanding all year long. And I think as the season has gone on, that Kansas State game and then after, everybody made it a point to try to be really physical with TCU, to try to trap them off ball screens, harass their guards. And so one thing that Mark Campbell did to adjust to that was he moved Donovan Hunter in the starting lineup, and he made her like the primary ball handler, the one that's initiating the offense. So it allows Van Lith at least to start most of these sets to play off the ball and then come get the ball off the dribble handoff and go to work. Hopefully make things a little easier for her. Sedona Prince, I mean, she makes such an impact on the defensive side of the floor every single night. But also they've found ways, whether it's mid-range jumpers or finding her in the post to get her involved in the offense. The big X factor to me, aside from your role players, like you're going to need Agnes to hit some big shots. And she did in the regular season finale against Baylor. She had some huge offensive rebounds against Baylor in the Big 12 tournament. She won a national championship at Stanford. That's an underrated thing about this team. They have a lot of tournament experience. Now, it's not at TCU, but Haley Van Lith has been in the Elite 8 a few times. Agnes has played in the Final Four. Taylor Bigby has been in the tournament, I think, 4 straight seasons with USC. Sedona Prince made some runs with Oregon when they were really good. So they have experience, right? But aside from some of those role players needing to step up, Taylor Bigby needs to find her shot. Madison Connor has to shoot the ball well for this team to be successful. She is such a difference maker when she's hitting threes, which she's done at an incredible pace this year. It just opens up the entire court and changes the floor spacing and the responsibilities of the opposing defense so much. There's a reason. I told you about this before the regular season finale against Baylor. When TCU went to play Baylor last season in Waco, and that was when they were rolling, they were still healthy. Obviously, this was before Haley Van Lith and all the great players they added. Nikki Collin made it a point. They were very physical with Madison Connor. They limited her airspace. They did not allow her to get open shots. When they played Baylor this year in Fort Worth, and they had a much more complete team, still, if you watch that game, from the jump, Baylor was trying to harass Madison Connor as much as possible. Big 12 championship game, similar thing. Nikki Collin understands it. Madison is the key to this offense. When she's hitting threes, everything opens up for this TCU team offensively. So if they're going to make a deep run in this tournament, she'll be a huge part of it. I'm excited to see it. Selection Sunday is on Sunday. And I'm ready to see where TCU lands, what their projection looks like, and what one seed they could potentially face off against in the Elite Eight if they get there. I know you got to win some games first. It's Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team every day. We'll come back, get some of your thoughts on yesterday's show. Before we do that, I do want to shout out one of our great sponsors, and that is TurboTax. Look, it's that time of year. This message from our sponsor, Inuit TurboTax. Taxes used to be waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, then waiting and wondering and worrying some more. Now taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return, while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. This is taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service, real-time updates in the iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantee. Yesterday, I spent a lot of time talking about TCU basketball. The men's team, they fell to Colorado in the Big 12 tournament, the opening round of the Big 12 tournament. We await to see what their postseason schedule looks like. But a rough season for Jamie Dixon and company. Just never really came together. They dealt with some injuries, but could not get on a roll. Brian says, shout out to TCU tennis for beating UT again. Coach Raditi rocks. Yeah, Brian and Jacob always keeping me on my toes about making sure I mentioned TCU tennis. TCU men's tennis is the most consistent program on campus. They're coming off a national championship win. They made it to the indoor finals, fell to Wake Forest in a very close match. But yes, I saw they beat Texas. I think it was 4-1, just dusted them, won the doubles point, and then really ran the board in singles too. So a very impressive win against a really good Texas team. And Coach Roditi is amazing. I mean, they are tough. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on tennis, but they come out and exceed expectations almost every year. I expect them to make another run towards the NCAA championship and the outdoor season. And yes, I'll keep close eyes on them throughout the year. Another user said this is about men's basketball, a lot rests on Ashton Simmons, RJ Jones, and Bug Edwards being able to be those guys. We have the pieces to support a primary scoring guard very well, but so much hinges on those guys panning out like we hope. It does. And I guess my big concern when we talk about Ashton Simmons and RJ Jones, I'm hoping that the red shirt that they took, that was their choice, or at least they were involved in the conversation. I do worry about guys redshirting and then bouncing to another school. We saw that with PJ Haggerty. Now, I don't know how thrilled he was about his redshirt situation, but he sat behind Mike Miles and Damian Ball, and then he was supposed to be the guy, and he decided, he wants to go elsewhere, and he's had a really good career at, I think, Tulsa, and then he went to Memphis, where he's played well. So RJ Jones was kind of an under-the-radar transfer portal pickup, but he had a super impressive high school career, was a very impressive prospect. So hopefully he can come in and make some plays. Hopefully Ashton Simmons can come in and make some things happen. They have some talent on this roster. I'm just not sure anybody is a lead dog, and you need to go get that guy in the transfer portal, but that's going to take a commitment from an NIL perspective that I'm not sure TCU has had the last couple of seasons. But we'll talk more about it throughout the week. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team. We do it here every day.